After an experimental drug trial goes bad, the test subjects face a terrifying side effect. If you fall asleep, you die. Welcome back to Movies Explained. Today's film is a horror thriller from 2023 titled Double Blind. The movie begins in the secret labs of Blackwood Pharmaceuticals, where a mouse is taken from its cage and prepared for decapitation. Meanwhile, Claire arrives at the company's modern facility to participate in clinical trials for 5 days due to financial need. As everyone changes into their scrubs, they are summoned to the exam room, only to find that there is no Wi-Fi or reception. Claire attempts to reassure her concerned mother not to contact her, but the message fails to deliver. Soon after, the group is introduced to Dr. Burke, who will oversee the trial. The medication dose will start off low and increase each day. Throughout the 5 days, participants are not allowed to leave the designated floor. A nurse monitors their health throughout the day, asking about pain, checking their pulse, taking their blood samples, and even accompanying them to the bathroom for samples. In an interaction with Allison, Claire reacts harshly and shouts at her, but abruptly stops when she feels nauseous and vomits in the bathroom. There, Claire meets Amir, a medical student aspiring to intern with the company in the future. That night, Claire experiences a strange chemical reaction in her brain, making it impossible for her to sleep. When she ventures out of her room, she discovers that none of the others can sleep either, which causes concern among them. Marcus mentions feeling something unexplainable. The following morning, Burke reassures them that a bit of insomnia is not a major issue, and the series of tests resumes. A clock on the wall displays the countdown to the end of the trial. Later, in her office, Burke contacts her superiors to report that whatever they are testing is directly affecting the participants' central nervous systems, leading to severe brain inflammation. The higher-ups remind her that this is a double-blind trial, meaning she isn't allowed to access more information. However, they are surprised to learn that the test results sent by Burke were obtained in just 1 day, which is too quick. The next day, Burke informs the group that the trial's conditions have changed, and now the company wants to determine how long they can stay awake. They are strictly prohibited from attempting to sleep, and if they feel too tired, they must notify Burke or a nurse. Claire undergoes a new dose and is placed in an MRI machine, which triggers anxiety due to her claustrophobia. The darkness and strange noises trigger terrible memories for Claire, reminding her of her intoxicated mother scolding her and refusing to let her leave. Claire is terrified and pleads for the test to end, but it continues until its conclusion. As time passes, the group becomes increasingly worried about their lack of sleep, as well as the rising dosage of the medication. Burke reminds them that they can leave at any time, but also announces a €30,000 bonus for those who stay until the end. Most of the group enthusiastically embraces the idea and begins cheering, but Claire and Amir remain cautious, believing there might be a hidden downside. The group begins celebrating by playing music and drinking champagne. Allison persuades Claire to dance with her. However, Claire starts yawning repeatedly, so she leaves to notify Burke. Soon after, Ray also yawns, prompting Burke to halt the festivities and instruct everyone to drink water. Later, Burke contacts her superiors once more, reporting that the participants' immune systems are malfunctioning. She proposes ending the trial prematurely, but the higher-ups reject her suggestion and instruct her to increase the dosage instead. While the participants engage in conversation to stay awake, Claire begins to drift off. Allison quickly intervenes to prevent her from falling asleep and inquires about her plans for the money. However, Claire responds dismissively, upsetting Allison, who leaves the room. Feeling the atmosphere is spoiled, Amir departs as well. As he walks down the corridor, he overhears Burke informing her superiors that she refuses to bear responsibility for the outcomes. Once Burke exits her office, Amir sneaks in and accesses the test results on her computer, uncovering evidence of brain inflammation. Shocked, he copies all the files onto a flash drive. As the group watches television, the screen suddenly malfunctions. Claire notices Allison sitting alone and approaches her to apologize, but discovers Allison has fallen asleep. Suddenly, Allison begins bleeding from her eyes, nose, and ears, and experiences a seizure. She collapses to the floor, her eyes turning bloodshot as she vomits and tragically passes away. Witnessing this, Burke sees the facility's computer announce a security breach, initiating a lockdown protocol. Alarms blare throughout the rooms, and the lights switch to red as the computer starts a countdown. Burke and the participants immediately flee the scene. As the door begins to close, Burke attempts to cross, but gets trapped and seriously injured by the heavy metal. The group manages to pull her out, but it's too late. Burke apologizes before passing away as the door shuts, leaving the participants trapped inside. The wall clock resets, starting a new countdown of 24 hours until the lockdown ends. Amir emerges from Burke's office and warns everyone to stay awake, explaining that falling asleep could be fatal. He reveals that after seeing the test results, he discovered their brains had been pushed to the limit for the past 4 days, causing them to shut down. Panic ensues among the group, with Ray becoming agitated while the others attempt to push the door with no success. In the recreation room, the TV displays a message from the company, urging them to remain patient. They discover a supply of smelling salts, and each person takes 5 packets, meant to help them stay awake throughout the night. Amir cautions them to use the salts only when absolutely necessary, but Ray uses one right away. Later, Ray finds some medicine in a cabinet, but Amir quickly advises against it. He also warns against drinking coffee or any stimulants, as they could intensify the strain on their brains. Amir believes their condition can be treated, so they must wait for help once the doors open. Over the next few hours, the group makes a joint effort to stay awake. At this point, they have been awake for 100 hours. Amir believes that the brain inflammation may decrease now that they've stopped taking the medicine. However, when he examines Claire's brain, the results deeply disturb him. Despite this, he chooses not to inform the others. As Claire walks down the corridor, she suddenly feels extremely dizzy and begins to hear her mother's voice. She tries to record a message for her mother, who is receiving palliative care due to liver damage caused by alcohol consumption, but she ultimately decides to delete the video. Later on, she comes across some mice in the lab and tries to set them free, but they refuse to leave. With 16 hours remaining, the group struggles to stay awake. Ray slaps his cheek to fight off drowsiness, having exhausted all his smelling salts. He begins pestering the others for their supply, but no one agrees to share. While Amir conducts tests in the exam room with the 2 bodies, he suddenly perceives Burke sitting up behind him. However, upon turning around, he realizes Burke remains motionless and deceased, indicating he may be experiencing hallucinations. In the recreation room, Claire listens to her mother's voice and becomes engulfed in memories of her eerie childhood room. Before succumbing to these thoughts, Marcus intervenes and pulls her back to reality. Claire wonders how Marcus manages so well, prompting him to reveal a scar from a serious hiking accident, as proof of the body's resilience in survival situations. Later, Claire visits Burke's office where she examines her patient file and reviews brain scans. She discovers that her history of destructive behavior and despair made her an ideal candidate for high-risk trials. During her stay, Claire finds Vanessa using fire to stay awake, determined not to give in to exhaustion. Marcus hears a response when he whistles in the bathroom, even though he believes he is alone. He turns on the tap but notices the water doesn't produce any sound until he turns it off. Similarly, he knocks on the mirror, but there's a delayed response. Feeling scared, Marcus leaves the bathroom and continues to hear whistling in the corridors. Despite searching, he doesn't encounter anyone. Suddenly, he sees the front door open and ventures into the darkness. Moments later, the group finds Marcus dead on the floor. The hallucinations caused him to fall asleep, leading to his untimely death. With only 15 hours left before the deadline, tension runs high among the group. Claire, feeling lightheaded, wanders away from the others and encounters a mouse in the kitchen. In an attempt to wake herself up, she accidentally burns her hand with fire, leaving a painful scar. Despite the injury, Claire remains focused and determined to find a way out. After tending to her hand, Claire expresses her frustration to the group and announces her intention to find a solution to their predicament. The group decides to map out the facility to identify the best location to break through the wall. Although Amir warns them of the facility's tight security, they decide to proceed with their plan and use an axe to break through the wall. They work together and make quick progress, eventually creating a hole big enough to explore. Unfortunately, Amir's concerns about the security of the facility turn out to be true. The wall they break through is shielded by thick metal, just like the door. Claire searches for Amir to seek his advice, but Ray begins to suspect that Amir might be secretly working with the company to keep them trapped. Claire eventually finds Amir, who hands her a letter confessing to his collaboration with the company. Meanwhile, Amir begins to experience hallucinations of Burke. Amir realizes that his action of copying the files triggered the lockdown, causing him overwhelming guilt. He contemplates falling asleep as a result. Claire intervenes, encouraging Amir to explore their mental capabilities by using fire metaphors. Inspired by this discussion, Amir proposes a novel idea. By utilizing specific medications as a type of poison, they could induce an effect typically resulting in brain death. However, due to the peculiar side effects they are experiencing, it might halt their impending death instead. Ignoring the hallucinations, Amir immediately begins working on the mix. Claire rushes to inform the others but collides with Paul. He warns her not to trust Amir, revealing that he found an empty bottle of stimulants in Amir's belongings, despite Amir's earlier advice against using them. As the power goes out, they rely on their phone flashlights to navigate. Claire, already overwhelmed, starts hearing her mother's and Allison's voices, leading to a breakdown. She turns around and sees a vision of a deceased Allison, prompting her to scream and drop her phone, plunging the area into darkness. Desperate, Claire tries using a lighter, which only intensifies her hallucinations. Eventually, she manages to ignite a flame, stopping the hallucinations. She locates the electricity box and restores power to the area. After finding Paul on the ground, Claire wakes him up just in time to prevent him from dying. The group then confronts Amir about the stimulants and the power box. Amir denies tampering with either, swearing he disposed of the stimulants for safety reasons. Despite Amir's protests, Ray punches him, and with Paul's assistance, ties him up. Vanessa, Ray, and Paul are convinced that Amir is hiding something and decide to force a confession out of him. Ray prepares to use a knife to intimidate Amir into talking. To prevent further violence, Claire intervenes by revealing Amir's efforts to develop a cure. When Ray accuses Amir of intending to harm them, Claire offers to be the first to test the cure, ensuring its safety. The group still refuses to let Amir go, so he provides them with instructions on how to prepare the medicine. While Paul is busy mixing the cure, Vanessa confides in Ray privately, admitting she saw him sabotage the fuse. Ray confesses he was attempting to make Amir fall asleep to prove his deceit, prompting Vanessa to reveal another secret. She has found a sedative they can use. Just as Paul finishes preparing the cure and gets the injection ready, Vanessa tries to administer the sedative to Amir. However, she suddenly collapses to the floor. Experiencing an out-of-body sensation, Vanessa watches as the others rush to her side. Soon she finds herself surrounded by smoke and darkness. She witnesses the manifestation of her fears as the devil appears before her, and she screams as her body starts bleeding and having a seizure. Paul hurriedly reaches for the cure, but Vanessa's trembling causes her to knock the needle away, shattering it. She then vomits and tragically passes away. Adding to the chaos, Paul's swift movements accidentally send the jar containing the remaining cure crashing to the ground, where it shatters. Amidst the turmoil, Amir begins laughing uncontrollably, prompting Claire to brandish a knife at him in a fit of rage. Recognizing her own unraveling state, Claire exits the room to check the clock, but her blurred vision makes her perceive the words, "Good night," instead of the actual numbers. As she listens to her mother's voice echoing in her mind, darkness clouds her thoughts. Dizzy and disoriented, Claire retrieves her phone and records a message for her mother before discovering her last packet of smelling salts, only to collapse to the ground, dropping it. All of a sudden, Claire experiences a surreal moment where her body seems to float upward while heavenly music fills the air. Despite the enchanting illusion, Claire resists and struggles to swim through the air to reach the packet of salts. Finally, she manages to take the salts and snaps out of the hallucination. As she gathers her senses, she hears a peculiar noise and investigates by tapping on the wall of the rec room, only to realize it's hollow. With Paul's assistance, Claire tears down the wall and uncovers a concealed autopsy room. Beyond it lies a door leading to a corridor and an elevator, signaling a potential escape route for them at last. Claire considers informing the others about the discovery, but Paul suggests they should leave quietly without involving everyone else. While this unfolds, Amir continues to encounter hallucinations of Burke, encouraging him to find his courage, and notes that Claire left the knife nearby. In another room, Ray bids farewell to Vanessa's body, only to stumble upon Amir's letter tucked in her pocket. Enraged, Ray sets off to confront Amir, who immediately starts screaming for help. Claire hears the commotion and rushes back, dragging Paul along. In the lab, Ray seizes a scalpel, preparing to retaliate against Amir. Amir struggles against his restraints and eventually breaks free. He lunges at Ray, stabbing him with the scalpel. However, Amir's deteriorating condition causes him to lose control, and he continues stabbing Ray until Ray is dead. Claire and Paul arrive just in time to witness the aftermath. They try to reason with Amir, but the hallucination of Burke drives him to continue the attack. Claire and Paul flee, with Paul barricading himself in the rec room. Claire finds herself trapped in the MRI room, where Amir, in his frenzy, inadvertently activates the machine. As Amir tries to stab Claire, the MRI machine's magnets snatch the knife from his grasp. Claire seizes the opportunity to kick Amir and flee. Meanwhile, Paul reaches what he believes is an elevator, only to discover it's actually an incinerator. He activates it unwittingly, and flames engulf him, leading to his death. Claire, armed with scissors, braces herself as Amir pursues her with his knife. Both on the verge of succumbing to exhaustion, they are interrupted by the countdown reaching 0. The lockdown ends, restoring power and opening the door. Armed men enter, promptly killing Amir. Claire, hearing the gunshot, hides as the men remove the bodies from the facility. After ensuring it's safe, Claire attempts to flee and encounters the bodies packed in bags. Swiftly, she smears Amir's blood on her face and climbs into a bag, pretending to be dead. Mistaken with the others, she's tossed into the back of a truck alongside the rest. Inside, Claire uses her phone's flashlight, grappling with hallucinations of a dead Allison beside her. To calm herself, she shuts her eyes and hums her mother's lullaby. When Claire reopens her eyes, a comforting vision of Allison briefly appears before fading away. As the truck distances itself from the facility, Claire emerges from the bag, startling the drivers so much that they lose control and crash. With both men incapacitated, Claire exits the vehicle but soon collapses unconscious after a few steps. 4 months pass, and Claire remains in a coma at the hospital. News reports declare Blackwood Pharmaceuticals innocent, pinning the blame on Burke for the incident. At that instant, Claire's eyes burst open. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos.